Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's 8:30, and at this time I'd like to call the meeting of August the 9th into order. The first order of business is the invocation, and if you'll bow with me, I'll lead us in prayer. Heavenly Father, you bless us every day with so many wonderful things, and we thank you so much for that. We are desperate for rain, Lord, in the hill country, and we would be blessed if you would send us some rain. We can always use it in the hill country. Our animals, our trees, our vegetation, our adults, all of our family in the hill country is desperate for rain. Lord, we also ask you to give us your wisdom and your guidance as we conduct the business of this meeting today. We want to thank you again for all the blessings that you give us. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. At this time, this is the Visitors Citizens Forum. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board, you're welcome to do so at this time. Okay. Item number 2 is approval of minutes. You all got a copy emailed to you, and hopefully you had a chance to look at them. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Can I hear a motion for approval? Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, is this the consideration for possible action of the sports complex project list? Ashley, this is where you want to take over and
Sure.
lead us through this?
At your places, you have an updated version of our project recommendations in the green, and we'll go through this presentation as kind of a reminder of what was approved, what hasn't been approved. But essentially, this is the list here that we have. The things that are in red are things that staff has updated since our last meeting and our tour. The things that are in green are things that have been approved. So just kind of a quick history on the timeline of this. In May, we presented this project list to you, and the board unanimously approved the list, the initial list. On June 12th, staff presented the project recommendations to City Council, and the soccer lights were the only item that was approved. July 10th, staff presented the project recommendations to City Council again, and Council authorized a couple of things, items 3 through 5 on the list: the common area irrigation and seeding, fertigation system with the building by the pond, and turfing of the outside of the dugouts. And then August 1st, we held a tour of the complex to discuss the project list, which most of you were there, with the council and the Parks Board. And the consensus was for us to meet again, that's why we're here today, to review the list and add kind of our nice to haves wish list versus our maintenance priorities, and that's kind of how we prioritize this list. Here's a couple of photos from our tour last week. And just a quick reminder, these are the items that have been approved. You see approved next to them at the top. This is a maintenance road that we're paving. This is actually added on to one of the final draws of the project, so this is something that's been approved. Soccer lights have been approved. They're actually, if you look at the picture to the right, they're in process of installing the lights now. They will be up next week. The common area landscaping improvements was approved in between basically the pods, the lanes, to improve those. Fertigation system with the building was also approved, and that's a picture of our pond. As a reminder, we have switched over to reuse as of a couple of weeks ago. Things are going well. Things are really functioning and operating great. Turfing of the dugouts, the area outside of the dugouts is something that was approved as well. And here's a kind of a close-up reminder of why we're doing this. You can see kind of the wear and tear of the need for it. The DBAT sidewalk extensions is the first item on the list of something that still hasn't been approved yet that we want to talk about. We kind of walked through this last week. Addition of additional sidewalks, the maintenance building extension to cover our equipment and our assets, and then irrigation and landscaping improvements around the DBAT building. And then the optional items were the playscape on the soccer side, making changes to the sign to add softball to it. And then the new items to consider are scoreboards per request of the council, playability of the fields per request of the council. We talked through that last week when we were at the tour. We walked through the fields, we got on the fields, looked at them, kind of talked through that. Staff has also identified turfing the bullpens as well, basically for maintenance issues, adding softball lights to pod 3, and then adding a little bit of additional parking on the soccer side. It won't give us a whole lot, but the more we can get over there, the better. So we have some preliminary costs for some of these items. The soccer lights, number 10 on your sheet, roughly our quote was $260,000. That's why we didn't include this on the initial list, because that pretty much exceeded our budget to begin with. So that's why it wasn't on this list. Scoreboards, roughly $100,000. Playability of the fields, that would roughly cost about $40,000. And then turfing the bullpens. Shane, do you recall?
We'd gotten 3 bids back on the turfing for the bullpens. The company that was going to do the turf in front of the dugouts was the low bid on that. They were around $70,000, $71,000 to turf the bullpens. The bullpens are a bit of a problem, number one, because they're hard to maintain. We're already stretched pretty thin doing what we're doing on the skinned areas and the grass, and having to put a lot of extra time in the bullpens is tough. It was talked about long ago in the beginning of the project. Turfing those would be great if we could, just for maintenance and time and everything else. But we do a minimum amount of maintenance on those because simply we don't have time. Yes, sir.
Sean, remind me, is there grass in the bullpens now?
No, sir. It's all infield mix and conditioner. So it's a skinned area essentially with.
But the mounds, it looked like there was some grass behind in the pod that we went in. It looked like there was some attempt at one time to have grass behind.
No, sir. Yeah, if there was any grass in there, it might have been a few little straggler weeds growing and stuff in there. We had, as a matter of fact, the day of the tour, we had sprayed those weeds, and they were actually dying, and we've since removed them.
Okay, so, but the whole bullpen is the infield.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and it's all basically built just like the infield of a baseball or softball field.
So explain to me why you want to turf it, or do you have a picture?
I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's
there you go.
Let's hold off on this. We're going to go through these one at a time, and let's start with number 6 and ask if the board has any questions, and if you have anything to add to what we already know about the DBAT building extension, the DBAT sidewalk extension. Because I know that this was one issue that one or two of the council people raised last week. This was not a real high priority with them. They would rather put the money on playability or whatever other projects that they had in mind. But tell us, this is, in ranking all 9 of these remaining issues, is this the number 1 priority for you?
For us, yes, for a couple of reasons. Number one, anytime that it's wet out there, we track mud everywhere. And it's not just us. If it rains at a tournament event or even, Kerrville Little League's playing out there during the middle of the week, anything like that, they're tracking mud and stuff everywhere. So it's a tad dangerous, in my opinion. We've also got a sidewalk that runs around the building that has 2 double doors that open into that sidewalk. And we had kind of discussed this at the tour. If you're walking down that sidewalk and somebody opens those doors very quickly, it could very much happen. Someone could get hit in the face. And there's a lot of people that come through there. Kerrville Little League, a large bulk of their play is up at Pod 1. So you have a ton of people coming in and out for games that are starting and games that are ending. Also the maintenance aspect of it with our carts, you can see on the picture where we drive, the area there that you can see a worn down path where we drive is the area that people walk. So they're not going around the side of the building, they're cutting through, which of course is what people do. So for us to ever make that look, aesthetically pleasing, plus, trying to keep the mud and everything off everything, and the problem with the mud too is the more the mud gets tracked back and forth, not only is it unsightly, but all of the weed seeds that are in that area get tracked through the mud over onto the field area and eventually get onto the grass. And so you're going to see a lot more weeds start to develop in our grass. It's just kind of the way nature works.
I totally agree with you. I think the fact that we know that is a dangerous situation for those doors to open out like that with the width of the present sidewalk, we have to fix that. If anybody gets hurt and we have to acknowledge that we knew it was dangerous, that puts us in a very poor situation. Besides, we don't want anybody to get hurt.
Yes, ma'am. And we've also seen people, you know, a lot of times, because everybody does this, people in wheelchairs and things like that, they won't go around the side of the building like that. They'll follow that path too. So, I mean, it's not, you know, you've also got issues with handicap accessibility and stuff like that. I mean, not to say that we don't have handicap accessibility, it's just that we know people are using this. We, just like you say, we full well know people are using this as a walkway.
So you're gonna alleviate that liability by adding more concrete away from the building?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's the number one priority for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I was asked at our tour out there whether there was an alternate material to be used, a softer kind of stuff, that not concrete. And there is stabilized soils you could use out there. Are you familiar with that stuff?
We looked at using like a concrete stabilized granite.
Yes.
The problem with that is that once it starts to pock out a little bit, almost like a pothole, that material gets tracked onto the fields as well.
Oh, I know.
And so we reel mow all of those fields with a reel mower, and one of the worst things that we can have getting into the blades on that reel mower is that granite. I mean, I think it would just...
I think it's cost prohibitive too.
It is, and it's counterintuitive to really what we're trying to do, in my opinion.
I was asked the question, so if it comes up again, we
yes,
have
sir.
an answer for
We
them.
kind of looked at this as, you know, we're not trying to put a Band-Aid on it, we're trying to put a permanent fix on it type thing, where we do it one time and it's finished and we don't have to address it again. So that's kind of why we came up with concrete. Not only that, it matches.
What's out there.
Yeah, it's structural for everybody to walk on. We're never going to have any issues after that.
Okay, any more questions on number 6? The maintenance building extension, that's moved up in the priority, looks like, hasn't it? Wasn't it lower down before?
It was a little bit further down, but as we're getting this new equipment, we've been approved for some more mowing equipment and top dressing equipment. We're not going to have anywhere to put it. So it's kind of, by all of the stuff that we have in our shop, and I guess probably the best thing to take a picture of is what our shop looks like whenever we put all the equipment in it at the end of the day. There's little bitty walking paths to try to get through there. We literally can't put anything else in there. And we're looking at the addition of another $40,000 mower and a $20,000 top dressing attachment. So sticking those things outside along with a $50,000 tractor that's sitting outside is kind of tough, in my opinion. I think we're asking for the wear of that equipment to exceed much faster than what it would if it was covered, obviously. We also have a lot of fertilizer, bulk fertilizer that we keep outside. In rain events, we have to run out there and put tarps over it. If we had a covered area, again, the area that we're adding on is not a heated and cooled area. It's simply just a roof with a couple of sidewalls on it. We're doing it as simple as we can, and keeping it cheap and still accomplishing the goal of covering the stuff that we need covered. So as October 1 approaches, that's kind of it moved up the priority list a little bit because we know we're getting this extra equipment and we really want to be able to try to cover it and take care of it.
Okay, but the cost is basically the same as we had before?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It actually stayed the same on the priority list. It was at number 7 before, and it's still a 7 for us.
Is it?
today.
Okay. I was thinking it was a little lower. Okay, by putting in number 8, that's new. Does that mean that it is a higher priority than number 9?
Yes, sir. And again, like Ms. Boyle said, when we started to develop this list, we really didn't go at it with full scale everything in the world that we need, because again, we knew some of this stuff would exceed the money that was there. When I was asked to start this list and try to prioritize some things, we were trying to use the money that was available. After talks and you know, everybody kind of that was involved with council and everything said they would like to see a list that was a little bit larger, that had more things on it and kind of encompassed everything. That's why we kind of went back to the drawing board with this. The bullpens right now, they're serving a purpose, but maintenance wise, again, they should be in better shape, and I have no qualms in the world telling you that. The reason they're not in better shape is because we simply don't have time to do it. By the time that we maintain the actual playing surface of the field, the bullpens are kind of the last on the list for us to have time to take care of. They need more attention. If we were able to turf them, not only does it keep us from having to work on it where we can spend more of our time on other things, but it's kind of a lifetime fix, because the turf that you'd put in there, it's not like regular turf on a football field that's going to get worn out anywhere from 7 to 8 years or so. This stuff's not going to be walked on like that. It's got very little traffic on it, so it's gonna be in there for the long haul. We won't have to do anything after this again.
So if this passes,
Yes, sir,
it would be done at the same time as number 5?
Sir?
It would be done at the same time as number 5?
If we could, that company obviously can give us a little bit of a price break if they're doing it all at the same time. Number 5, and I'll just touch on that, I know that's kind of getting out of order. The company that was going to do it, they still want to do it, and they're our best bang for the buck by far. But we're probably going to have them do it in the winter months when they have a little more time, because they just picked up 2 really large football field jobs. So they were kind of on board to come, and they were going to knock it out, and then they had to call me and say, hey, we can't turn these jobs down. Our contractor above us really needs this work done. And so I told them, well, maybe for us the best thing to do would be to do it in the winter when there's no baseball play out there at all, and that way we don't impact anybody. It doesn't make any sort of an unsafe situation. I feel like it'll be better. And again, using that company, they were drastically cheaper than a lot of other companies.
Is there an estimated extra cost on the bullpens?
The turf bullpens through them came in at around $70,000. They said if they did both of the projects at the same time, they could drop about $7,000 to $8,000 off of that. So I think we're looking, if in a perfect world we can do both at the same time, the one that's approved and this, they would end up costing about $62,000. The other estimates that we got to do those were in about the $150,000 range, because it's 22 bullpens total. And then, I'm sorry.
Just a question. It seems to me the bullpens, there's 2 people that go into the bullpens 3 times a game.
Possibly.
That's almost an aesthetic kind of a deal, rather than, there's no playability. The mound is not much. The catcher spot, I mean, that's almost like we're just prettying it up for $70,000. I'm gonna trust your judgment here, but to me that would be, not that big a deal.
I'm in agreement that
put
the
a rake in there
expense.
and let the guys that go in there, they don't like it, let them rake it. I'm not, but I'm gonna trust your judgment. I'm just.
So what, if we move that up in the priority list, we have to drop something out, because we're spending all of our money anyway. So that's another $47,000 that you're adding in. What are you thinking about dropping out?
Well, we moved the DBAT irrigation further down, because we're able to kind of temporary irrigate it right now. And so like when you guys were there on the tour, they'd done a pretty good job of kind of getting grass established in the front. It was way better than what it was when you and I walked it. So we're making that work. It's not necessarily the best situation, but they've agreed to help us a little bit in moving temporary sprinklers and things around. So in my opinion, we were able to drop that off a little bit, because I think the playability of those bullpens, we have people using them, so it's kind of hard to say, hey, we're not going to pay any attention to that, even though we know that's a problem. So I felt like it was a little bit more important. On the bullpens as well, some of the problems that we run into also is whenever we have rain events and things like that, you can see in the one picture with the gate that's open, you can see a small black liner between the fence and the red dirt material. You can kind of just see the top of it in the first picture to the left. It's called an interface. That interface material actually was meant to be taken out. But the problem is that we realized really quickly that there's nothing to hold that material from sliding right outside the chain link fence and from weeds to protrude and grow through. So we knew kind of in the beginning we had a little bit of an issue with this, and I asked them to leave that interface in, because if not, it would be in an even worse condition than it is. Well, over time, that interface is going to break down with the sunlight and everything else. It's going to get brittle, it's going to crack, it's going to go away. And where we have problems is in rain events, all of that rain, all of the rain washes that material outside of that fence. So obviously we haven't had any rain events lately, so it's pretty hard for me to show anybody that. But usually after a big rain, we have to go back through there, number one, and clean up all the material on the outside of the fence, but put new material back inside the fence to make the bullpens usable, because they get huge erosion tracks in. For example, this week we had one down on softball that we just hadn't had time to deal with. And it was so bad that the home plate area, the concrete was exposed in it about 6 inches, and it had a big runoff rut in it where we had to dump several bucket loads of infield mix in with our tractor and smooth it back up and make it to where it was usable. We kind of put it at the end of our list because we hadn't had anything going on down there, but we were trying to get it fixed this week before we did have something.
Okay, I'm looking at the total project balance of $255. That's That's how much money we have available, right?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
If we get it passed by council. But if you look at adding in the turf bullpens, and even if you delete the DBAT irrigation, you're still over 255,000.
Yes, sir. And the reason that we did this was at that last tour that we had out there, it came up a couple times of that people just wanted to see it on the list. Not necessarily that this list was something we were going to use every bit of our money for and it would take care of everything on the said list. They just wanted to see it on the list in some form or fashion.
Yeah, a contingency that we maybe can do next year or the year
Yes, sir.
at some
And
point.
so that's why what we basically did was we went back to this and said, hey, so if we are going to develop a list that not only contains things we need to do, but more of a wish list or a non-priority item, that's kind of what this list is.
So once all the items that were approved, we have about 57,000 left in the project budget to complete some of the remaining items. So as Shane said, this list is kind of a comprehensive list of everything that we've identified. We might not be able to do some of the items in order because of the funding and then because of the amount that they cost. But this is basically our priority list. But again, we may not be able to spend it in that order because of the dollars that we have to work with.
I'm gonna interject one thing. I have had teams playing on turf fields, and the coaches and administrators on those fields do not allow them to wear cleats. Juniors and above wear cleats, metal cleats.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to have metal cleats in those bullpens to work out, you're tearing up that turf.
We brought it up to the turf, the people that were going to install it, and the way that they were going to put that turf in and the turf they were going to use, it was going to be okay, because that was something that came out kind of fairly early was, well, are we going to have to ask kids to change shoes? That's not very realistic. That's just not going to work. And the man, Denny was his name at ProTurf, said that no, this will be fine. That we're going to construct it in a manner that it's going to be fine. It's not going to be a problem. We do this all the time at fields that are natural grass fields, but they don't necessarily have the manpower or the time to maintain these bullpens.
What's the base? Is it asphalt?
No, they'll base it with a limestone base, and then they put a little bit of granite in there to be able to drain it. So it's kind of its own little self-draining I think they're about 10 foot wide by 30 foot long, 35 foot long, somewhere in there. So that it has drainage to get out, because we also told them that we have drainage. The field's crowned in a way where the water runs off like this in a crown, and we didn't want these turf bullpens to impede any of the drainage. We didn't want water stacking up in the foul line areas because we went through and turfed the bullpen. We didn't want to fix a problem and create another one.
Right.
So that material's porous, so it just goes right through it. Again, they said this was a situation that they've worked with many times. They've seen it in a lot of areas. A lot of times people ask them to come through and they'll even, at times to cheapen it up a little bit, they'll reuse turf. They have a process where they can go through and take turf that's taken off of another field, reuse it, and put it in these areas to help with these maintenance problems.
Is there any type of guarantee, or how long is the guarantee that this is gonna do exactly what they say it's gonna do? That if kids play on it with cleats, it's not gonna tear it up?
I didn't ask him for a guarantee on that. He told me that this would be a very long-term solution to this problem, meaning that, I mean, it could go, traditional turf goes about 7 years, 5 to 7 years, kind of depends on how you play on it. I think we saw that with Antler Stadium a few times, how they've taken it out. But this is, we're looking at 15, 20 years, because it's not gonna receive that kind of wear like a large stadium, like a football stadium or soccer stadium would.
Okay, here's my point. If you take items 1 through 7, that's $231,500. And we're looking at a total availability of 255. So if we go to council with this list like this, with $47,000 in there for turf bullpens, we are way over over the money that's available. So my recommendation is that we move that down in the order a little bit and get the DBAT irrigation done before we do the turf bullpens. They're not going to approve anything more than 255,000, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. So why do we want to put that in as a high priority item then if we know we can't get it approved? Unless we delete something else.
The way that they're ranked was not based on the funding, the dollars that we had to work with. It was based on our need, and that's kind of what they're looking for from us, is our recommendations and our priorities of what do we need out there, what does it cost, what can we afford, and that's something that the dollars that staff will work on our end. So once we get our list approved, we'll figure out, okay, so what can we do? This ranks higher than this, but we only have money for this, and kind of work through that list. But what we're here to do today is to basically put together a comprehensive list of needs and wish list items for the complex in general, is what they asked us to do.
So what are they asking? They ask you, staff, to do that. What are they asking us as the advisory committee to do?
To develop the list, to help us develop the list of items that need to be added on the
Well,
priority list.
Ashley, let me challenge that a little bit. I'm not challenge it, I don't mean to be done in a negative way. I think you developed a need, and I'm not gonna sit here and argue at all with your and your staff's list of needs. That's not, I don't believe that's my role. Now, if council wants us to look at this need and say, okay, under realistic conditioning and of what's available, what would we suggest to council that we go fund? I'd be willing to do that. And that, I think that's what Bedford's getting at.
Exactly.
But I'm not going to, I'm not going to challenge your need. If they want us to prioritize what's funding, then I'll help do that. And, I mean, that's maybe a fine point, but I can't argue with I mean, I can argue, but I mean, you're paid to define need. We're, I think, paid to, we're paid to help prioritize as to, under current budget, what we think we ought to do. And so, at least that's my opinion. So.
And I think the issue of the bullpens right now, I think the consensus on everyone is that that's not a necessity or a priority.
We've heard more as far as playability out of the bullpens than anything else on the fields, and that's the only reason I stuck them in there. Is that's we've gotten more feedback on those than anything.
Well, in order, if you think it's worthy of, being on your priority list, we're going to be over the budget. We're going to be over our 255. So, are you willing to cut something else out and put that in? I think we have to go to the council with a plan to spend as much money as we can, not to exceed $255,000. And if you put something in for another $47,000, we don't have the money. There's no sense in. I mean, if you're saying that it's a higher priority than something else that has already been approved or will be approved, basically what you're saying is that some of the other items up there need to be taken out and moved down in the list somewhere.
Sure.
below the deep
again,
end.
the first list that we came up with was basically to try to allocate the entire use. We had X
Right.
amount of money to work with, so we tried to fit everything we could into that list.
And I think that's what we still should be doing.
Sure, and I agree with that. I guess we came up with this list because that's kind of what we were asked at that tour to do.
Okay, I
was come
think
up with
what
a
they were
comprehensive
really
list.
asking is, okay, give us your priorities, and your priorities in our case for $248,000, and then below that, give us your wish list of anything else that you want. And at some point in the future, maybe we can come up with some money for that.
How many more weeks of baseball do we have?
Right, well, tournaments will run all the way through December.
Oh, through December.
Yes, ma'am. And again, the tournaments, sometimes some of them make, some of them don't. It kind of all depends. You can have, and I feel DBAT's pain in this, they've had several instances where they've had 15 teams, 16 teams signed up for a tournament, and then all of a sudden they bail kind of last minute, and they only end up with like 4, and the tournament doesn't happen. So the tournament business is a little bit tough in the regards of you can have teams all of a sudden take off and go somewhere else and play another tournament. And so they have plans to have tournaments all the way through December. Now, does that mean that they're all going to make? No, it doesn't. But they are definitely trying to make these tournaments happen every weekend all the way to December. Like, for example, there's a softball tournament this weekend, but talking to Tim Butts, their tournament director, he doesn't believe it's going to form because they just haven't had enough interest, or they did have interest and then some teams backed out and they went somewhere else.
So do you think it's more important to, well, even if we took out, that it's more important to turf the bullpens than the dugouts? I mean, I know we want it all.
Yes, ma'am.
We need it all.
And again, I'm not
We don't
saying
have
that
enough money.
it's more important than that. All I did when I made this list was if we were to prioritize everything that I thought needed to be done, that's all I did. I'm not recommending that we do one over the other. And again, maybe I interpreted this wrong from our tour. I thought that the need was for a list that just basically started from 1 through whatever it may be in priority, but not necessarily. I knew all along we didn't have the money to do it all. I was from what I understood is that there was a need for a list in a prioritized manner. Correct, or did I take that completely wrong?
I didn't take it like that at all. What I took it to be is that we have $255,000 to spend. How do you want to spend it?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, and that's what we did with the first list.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm thinking
Yes.
we need to be doing again.
Yeah.
Maybe the same list, but just add other contingency items down below. But we need to show that the items that we had on our original list, 1 through 9, are in fact our high priority items. And the turf bullpens, for instance, would be down below that.
Because of funding, correct?
Because of funding, yeah.
So with the balance that we have left, about roughly 57,000, we could do number 6, number 7, number 9, and 14, and still have about 7,000 left. So we could also do number 16 if we wanted to do that. And that would basically take the remaining balance of that 255.
That's what I would suggest that we do.
6 and 7 are definites.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
If you can't figure out a cheaper way to do a plaque than 6,000, I think one of the councilmen had a really good idea how to save $6,000.
Yeah, that was
Unfortunately, that wouldn't last very long. But, yeah, so.
Yeah, I'm not trying to throw water on your wish list here, but I think what we need to go to council with is a list of how we want to spend the $255,000, 1 through 9 or 1 through whatever it is, and then below that we say the next priority item would be turf bullpens or whatever it is.
We can do that. We'll do that. We'll put that list together with what we can basically afford to accomplish, and then also include on there in a separate area or a separate list of our wish list items, approximately how much they cost, in the hopes that we maybe get additional funding down the road to accomplish those.
Make it a 2019.
So.
So that would be 1 through 7 plus 9 plus 14.
14 and 16.
Not 15 and 16, yeah, just 14.
Well, and
Why not
16.
16?
And 16, because we'll have
Oh, and
enough for
16,
16.
right.
Do we need to make a motion on that?
Oh, wait a minute.
Or was that a
hold it,
motion?
on number 16. Okay, explain, why don't you explain to the board what number 16 is about?
Okay, so this is what we kind of talked about before, is this sign only says baseball on it, and the thought process and what we've kind of heard from some user groups is to add softball to that. We looked into that. It's not the reason why it costs about $5,000 to fix. It's not a quick fix. If we do just add softball on there as it is, it's going to look like basically a Band-Aid and an oversight and an afterthought. So we'd basically have to redo that entire section to make it still look quality work. That's why it's going to be costing about $5,000. That's why it was on our optional list.
Can we just go over there and white out the
Just call it ball
Ball
fields?
fields.
But the baseball fields are on this side where the sign is now. The soccer fields are on the other side of the road.
No, it's not soccer.
No, it's not.
It's baseball, softball.
They want to put softball on there.
Oh, okay.
That's-
Oh,
I
all right.
mean,
Okay.
the intent here is to show that, we're playing
Okay.
we're playing baseball and softball over here. We just simplified it by saying baseball. To spend $5,000 to add the word softball, to me, is not a good use of funds.
Just take off the word base. turn it into ball fields.
Then it's not,
You still
So it
have
costs
to,
$5,000.
It's still not
it's still gonna
center.
cost
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah,
You take SEBA
I think
off
that
it,
was
see
brought
the
up not only
office
by
ball.
myself and a few other people that have girls that play.
Mhm.
And by eliminating the word softball, you're saying that only boys are allowed there. So that's where it came from,
is it still a high priority for you?
yes.
Okay,
Do we need a motion?
Yes.
I make a motion that we, go to council with 1 through 7, 9, 14, and 16 as the top priorities, supported by.
I second it.
motion's made and seconded. Any comments by anybody? How much money is that total?
That would be, the remaining would be 50,000, so, do quick math here.
$253.
248.
I got 253. 31, 41, 51, 52, 53.
$253.
Okay.
So then, is it my understanding that when we start talking budget again for next year, that we will ask council for the rest of these?
We've already submitted our budget. We're already in the middle of our budget process.
Okay.
Council's expected to adopt it in September. But this is something that we will discuss with the council and the city manager and decide what path forward we want to take. If there is any allocation of dollars that we can put toward these projects, I don't know.
And we could make the turf, the bullpens, the number one priority on that,
We have a
if they give us more money.
motion and a second.
Yes,
Let's
yeah,
finish
okay.
that.
Any more comments? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
1. Okay, motion passes. I know the question about scoreboards is a big item with some people on the council. Tell us what we know. I know that you've mentioned that DBAT is looking into scoreboards, but we don't know any more than that, do we? Or do you?
They've gotten quotes on what they would cost. You see it as number 12 on the list. That's 11 scoreboards. That's also the installation of the scoreboard to the stanchions that we would have to put up. So when I say installation, it's not a full installation. You would still have to have an electrician run the electricity and have power there for them to hook to. So that's not covered in that $92,000. And then you'd also have to have I-beams poured and set in the ground that they can adhere that scoreboard to as well. That's not considered in there as well. Again, we don't have those costs right now. We kind of just put it on there for the sake of giving people an idea of, hey, this is what it's going to be. It would definitely be in excess of $92,000. I think you're probably looking at somewhere in reality about $110,000 when it's all said and done with the electricity and the poles and everything. Again, I'm not an electrician. That's kind of just a number that I'm throwing out so that people can understand the idea of how much it would cost.
I was under the impression that DBAT was looking into scoreboards, meaning that they were looking into scoreboards that they would fund.
Yes, that's true. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the money that they would spend, not the city of.
True. Yeah, they're looking into funding options for someone outside of the city
Okay.
of Kerrville.
Okay. I'm with you.
And when I say that, I don't mean outside the city limits. I mean outside of the city of
Right.
Kerrville entity to pay for these and put these in.
Right, so that's not an issue for us. We're thinking that they're gonna be able to handle that.
It seems that way. I mean, I know they're in talks. I'd hate to say, yeah, they're gonna take care of it. Don't worry about it. They may come back and say, hey, that's way more money than what we can come up with and deal with. It's still an issue. Luckily, we haven't had a baseball game canceled because we have scoreboards. That's baseball or softball. So luckily, it's not something that everything is hinging on. It's one of those things. Would they be nice to have? Sure, it'd be great to have. But the world's still turning, without them out there. So
That's why it wasn't on our
yeah.
original list, that and the amount that it would cost.
Right.
It's
Okay,
nice to
well,
have.
that's good to know. It's good for the council to know that DBAT is serious about trying to find funding for school. Scoreboards are pretty important, a couple of those guys. And I would tend to agree with that. We need scoreboards out there. And if we can kind of make them feel better about it, knowing that DBAT is actually working on that project and it's not going to cost the city any money, or very little money to speak of, to make that happen, I think we'll get their vote on this kind of a project.
Yeah, I know that Tom Howdeshell personally is working on it, and they're approaching local businesses. And I believe there's been, from what I've heard, is there's quite a bit of interest in people wanting to put money towards it, wanting to sponsor. Yes, sir.
Okay. Wonderful.
So I think there's two things that we still need to talk about. One would be the playability of the fields. I know this is something that's been kind of a topic the last couple of meetings, particularly with one of the council members, and also at our tour. So I guess I would like to ask your opinion. Is there in your minds an issue of playability of the fields? Is that something that we should really consider? And then the second would be, are there any other items that we want to add to our wish list that you see?
Well, I will say this about the playability. The main reason that we asked the council to come out there and have you explain everything to them last week was to show them basically the playability of the fields. And as far as I was concerned, I was very impressed with the playability of the fields, and I think the council was too, with maybe one or two exceptions. I think they had to see it firsthand to understand that the fields are really good, really good. When you go to a Major League Baseball field, they actually drag the fields, between innings sometimes, or every game actually. So our fields are very good compared to anything else in the area, I'm pretty sure. So as far as I'm concerned, and I'm anxious to hear what everyone else has to say, as far as I'm concerned, the playability is not an issue. But I'm willing to hear what everybody else has to say.
Once again, I defer to Shane on this, as far as what you think it is.
I'd put those fields up against any D3 baseball field in the state.
There you go.
Yep.
Any D3 college baseball field.
So what are we talking about with the playability of the fields? They look fabulous. You're doing a great job. So.
Well, one option that that was brought up by a council member is that we actually go in and remove all of this. Well, Shane, you explain it. Remove the top layer.
The idea was brought up, and again, so I'll backtrack a little bit. I consulted with Texas Multichem. We did have a problem with these fields. Let's start with that. There was a problem when we got them from Mid-America. There was way too much conditioner on them. They were way too hard to play on. And so what we started was a process that was recommended to us by Texas Multichem, which is a local company in town that builds sports fields. And the process was that we would go through and till these fields with the aerator that we have to mix those materials up, because you have an infield mix, which is sand and clay, and then you have a Diamond Pro conditioner on top of it, which in an ideal situation is only about 1/2 inch thick. In this case, it was about 2 inches thick, 2.5 inches thick. So what we started, and that Diamond Pro that sits on top is purely, for the most part, aesthetics. It does have a little bit of playability with it. It helps you slide a little bit, but it's a vitrified clay material. It absorbs a little bit of water, but it's heavy on the aesthetic side. It's really, people started using it to make fields look really nice when they drug them. It does that. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. The problem was it was too thick, so we went through and started tilling it in at the recommendation of Texas Multichem, and we started a process of tilling, watering, rolling, dragging. And we did that, and we repeated that over and over and over. And the idea was also that the more play that we had on it, the more it was going to kind of grind some of that stuff in. So that's what we've been doing. And we've taken that surface from what it was, which wasn't the most highly desirable playable surface out there, to a surface that we've gotten a lot of compliments on. the idea with changing this playability issue, this number 13, it was posed that Texas Multichem, the very same company that recommended us how to fix this, would go through and dig all of this infield material out and redo it. I talked with the owner of Texas Multichem multiple times. He personally felt it was a waste of money because it's just, we're not at that point. We've made it a very good surface. We've made it a highly playable surface.
And you feel that over time, by doing the same process, it'll get better and better?
Yes, ma'am.
And Shane, why did we put it on the list?
Because we were asked to put it on the list.
Well, okay, all right.
I think that's great. We were asked to do this.
This is not your list then?
But
Well, it's not, you just said it, it's not your list.
well, yeah, I mean, $40,000, hey, that almost builds the playscape. I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
we could put that, if we put that on the bottom of list of priorities, then that lets us have a year or two of play on it to see if maybe there was something that we need to correct. If there were something we need to correct. But I just don't see that as a priority right now at all.
What do the people, the DPAD owners say? Do they complain about the condition of the field at all?
Not at all. Not at all. We've got nothing.
But Shane, I think you're doing us a disservice by leaving this on the list. I mean, you've told us out there and you tell us here today, this is not your priority at all. Personally, I'll echo what I think I hear.
But if they were asked by someone in authority to put it on the list, they have to put it on the list. Is that correct? Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, ma'am. I'm kind of in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I
on
see
this.
that. Well, let's see if we can't get you out of that
Yeah, and that-
situation and just not remove it, but put it at the very bottom. I would much rather see the soccer playscape in place than redoing something that is working fine right now.
Could we have a motion, please?
I move that we move that in our priorities, the playability of the fields. We leave it on the list, but we put it as the final priority with the idea that that will give us a chance to see if this situation continues to be better and better, or if, gee, in a year or so, maybe we need to reconsider doing that.
I second.
Any further comment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. I totally concur, by the way.
Good deal. And then, so now, I guess I would ask you, are there any other items that you would like us to add to the overall comprehensive wish list? I know we've heard a little bit from senior softball, and I can imagine that's why Mr. Neiman is here today, on possibly doing some modifications to some of the fields to allow to bring in senior softball tournaments. Is there anything else that y'all have heard or seen or would like to see that we can add to our big list?
One thing, I heard some side comments during our walkthrough last week about the soccer playscape, that there may be already some soccer groups already focused on that activity itself. Can you update us on that at all?
Or is that incorrect?
On funding the playscape?
Yes.
Yeah, we've heard from one entity that's interested in possibly doing a grant for it, a matching grant. And that's something that we told them, once we figure out if we have any dollars to spend, and they asked us to come back to them at that point. But we do have one entity that's interested in doing possibly a matching grant for that.
Was that a soccer-oriented entity, or
No.
No?
No, it's a private foundation.
Okay, well, what was sort of passed to me in passing was that one of the soccer groups, and I don't know which one it was already actively working on some stuff there. Maybe I'm wrong, or, okay.
If so, that's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anything
Okay,
like that.
all right, thanks. Yes.
Can we reach out and see if any of those are interested in or are already doing something?
Sure, you bet.
And I would propose that you separate your list and not continue it from whatever number we ended up with. have the recommendations that we are making here from 1 through whatever it is, 11 or 12, whatever. And then down below, additional contingency items separate altogether, not even part of that list. Make it a separate part of the page.
That's the plan.
Okay.
What about additional landscaping? I know Shane was talking about trees out there.
Do you want me to talk? We have a little bit of money that we're going to use in this year's budget. We're kind of waiting toward, hopefully we can get out of this heat cycle that we're in to be able to plant some trees. But we're looking at, we've got a couple $1,000s that we're going to add some trees on the baseball side. We're trying to add them in areas where they're really not going to blow against the fences and create a maintenance nightmare when the leaves drop on them and things like that. But we also in this irrigation common area sod, there's a little bit of money in there for trees as well. So we're going to try to strategically place them in areas where it's not going to create a maintenance nightmare, or we have kids necessarily climbing on them during a baseball game. But it's definitely something we're going to do.
I have one other issue that I observed.
Did the tour. There is a disconnect, large disconnect right outside the DBAT building. One of your pictures may even show it. You remember where you drive, where they drive the
On the maintenance road?
Where they drive the well, it's to your left of the left picture here.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's right by that maintenance road.
Yeah.
We're going to fence that in and windscreen.
Thank you.
Good point. All right. Anything else? Okay, on item number 3.
Mr. Chair, I do believe we have a speaker that signed up
Oh, we
to speak
do?
on this item.
Oh, okay. Now's a good time for that? Let's see. How about number 4? Anything for the future agenda?
I think he's wishing to speak on item 3A.
Oh, 3A, okay. You're welcome. Take the floor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, my name's Robert Naiman, and I'm on the Economic Improvement Corporation. And I know I look in the mirror every day and don't believe that I'm old enough to be in senior softball, but actually I am. I've been a member of the Texas Hill Country Senior Softball League since 2013 and a past board member. And I brought with me Mr. Ken Weber, who is a founder of the league and has been a president for at least 4 years, maybe more. What we were entertaining was the possibility of bringing sanctioned men's senior softball tournament to Kerrville. And I had met with Mr. Chris Montgomery, who's over at DBAT, and spoke with him. Told him some of the things that we would need to do to modify the fields. And he was very interested. And I also talked to a council member and EIC board member, Ms. Siegerman, and she expressed an interest. And so basically, what I'm here for is to, I guess, seek the blessing of this board to proceed with meeting with people from a nationally sponsored that sponsor these tournaments. SSUSA and SPA are a couple of the organizations that sponsor men's softball tournaments around the country. What you normally have, what we had before was our league played at Singing Wind from 2013 until this year. And quite frankly, Singing Wind was problematic in a lot of areas. And this complex has fulfilled a lot of the needs that were lacking at Singing Wind. So in order to have, to back up, a men's senior softball tournament would, and I'm going to have Mr. Weber confirm this because he's an expert in this. I myself have not been to a men's senior softball tournament. But we would, it would be a 4-day tournament. And actually, it would bring in between 500 and 600 participants for a tournament. And about 25 to 30% of those participants would normally bring their spouses. It would require 2 nights stay for most of the members. And the tournaments would start on a Thursday morning and run through Sunday. So a lot of the participants that started on Thursday morning would come in Wednesday night, and they'd stay Wednesday night, Thursday night. And what we have is groups from different divisions, 40 plus, 50, 55, 60, 65. So there's several divisions. And so that's how we would stagger the 4-day tournament. Basically, what we need is, in order to play a senior softball tournament, 70-foot bases. And currently, none of the fields are configured for 70-foot bases. So when we played out at Singing Wind, we did have 70-foot bases, but currently we play with 65-foot bases is how we're playing now. And that may not seem like a big deal, but at our age, 5 feet makes a big difference when somebody's hitting a ground ball to you at third base. And to point out that we have women who play from the age 45 and up, and we have one member who is close to 80 years old, 85? 85, plays, and
Her picture was in the paper here recently.
okay, there you go. We have a gentleman, I think Angelo's at least 83, and I won't tell how old Mr. Weber is. He's probably no more than about 62. But anyway, so I met with Chris, and what we're really seeking just at the moment is your blessing for us to proceed with meeting with someone from the national organization, meeting with Ashley, meeting with the owners of DBAT, and coming up with what it would cost to make the fields playable for a men's senior softball tournament. Mr. Weber will expand on it, but I understand Georgetown has at least 2 tournaments a year. College Station has a couple of tournaments a year. Dallas has tournaments, obviously. This is something that hopefully, depending on what the cost would be, we could recoup that by bringing in a tournament of this size. And quite frankly, seniors tend to probably, are not going to just eat at McDonald's and Dairy Queen as a rule. And so I think they might be able to spend a little bit more money. I know that if I had 2 young kids or 3 young kids and I was coming here, I wouldn't be eating at the Cowboy Steakhouse or places like that, just as a cost situation. So basically, that's what we're here for, to see if and obviously the money would have to come from the city, maybe from the EIC or another source. But before we proceeded, we thought we'd come before your board and see if you'd be interested in us making the effort to see if it was doable. And I'd like to have Mr. Weber come up just briefly, because he goes to these tournaments and he can explain in detail, the economic impact of what goes on, if that's all right with the board.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't know softball or baseball, but what does that mean that you need 70-foot bases versus 65-foot bases? I mean, does that mean everything has to come in, or everything has to push out, or?
Out. In other words, from home plate right now to first base is 65 feet. Okay.
And that is done because like the Little League needs that? I mean, so are we in 2 different things because Little League, senior softball, everybody's got different requirements, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We originally, when the complex, well, I guess I was actually at the EIC meeting in 2014, November, when it was proposed and passed. I think I was the only member of the public that was there at the time. And Mr. Weber and I had met with Mr. Matthews when they were developing the fields, and apparently, maybe we didn't communicate well or whatever, but we indicated that we would need 70-foot fields. That's what we play on at Singing Wind. And they actually made the adjustment at Singing, I believe there was an adjustment made at Singing Wind, basically just to move the bases out. And at Singing Wind, it wasn't really an issue because the infield was cut in such a manner that it didn't propose a problem. We need 4 fields in order to sponsor a tournament, 4 that qualify under the associations that would bring these tournaments in, and they would sanction them. And they would help promote them, and they would have players that would come in. We have players in Kerrville that travel to Georgia, to Arizona, to Denver, so people go, they're willing to do this.
And so you're trying to figure out, so there's been no budget formed of what it would take to make 4 fields 70 foot, is that correct? There isn't a budget
Right,
yet
that's
to
right,
how
right.
much extra it would cost.
Right.
Sean, what would be, Shane, what would be involved for you to switch some of our fields
I think what we're
back
looking
and
at,
forth?
we've talked about this a little bit before in depth. I think we're looking at probably cutting out. Is everybody familiar what a fly arc on a baseball field is, where the red dirt meets the grass? I think we're looking at going another 15 feet to 20 feet or so and cutting that entire area of grass out above that. In doing that, you've got to move the irrigation back because there's 2 sets of irrigation. You've got irrigation that waters the red dirt, the infield material, and you've got irrigation that waters the grass. So by doing that, you dig out 5.5 inches or so of that. You take the grass out, dig out 5.5 inches, put infield mix in there, put conditioner back over it, and you have to move that irrigation out as well. On the baseball fields, it could be done. We could do it, but we'd have to take the mounds off. And that's something that can be done. You just take a tractor in there, you basically scoop a mound off, and you just make it flat. And I think that was something that we had talked about being able to do. So really what you're looking at, the bulk of the expense is going to be is extending those fly arcs, adding that infield material to where they can have the 70-foot bases. And then again,
are we talking like 10 grand per field? Are we talking 50
I think you'd be looking at anywhere from 10 to 15,000 per field. And again, that's just kind of a guesstimate, but with moving the irrigation, and it'd be a one-time thing. It's obviously not something you have to do every tournament. Once you do it, it's done.
Why was this not done in the first place? I mean, is that a stupid question? But
Yeah.
A question, I used to play.
Senior, old softball, old man softball, a long time ago.
Well, why aren't you out there now?
Because I'm too old.
No, you're not.
But one thing I always like to do, we always like to do, is drink.
Yes, sir.
And I know we don't drink it.
water, right?
Yeah. But alcohol is prohibited
Yes,
here. And is alcohol prohibited at all these other senior softball tournaments? Okay, so this is not unusual. You all can deal with that.
There is no drinking at any of the tournaments.
Well,
In the
Premise.
Huh?
at any other tournaments,
That's
okay.
changed since
That
I
is
played.
changed.
Maybe
Well,
because you guys got too rowdy.
I can't say that for the younger tournaments I've been to when I was in my 40s, 50s, and 60s. But in any senior tournament I've been to, there has been no drinking.
Okay, good.
Now, Shane,
You can deal with that then.
how many fields would we have to convert? You say baseball, we don't have to convert.
No, we would have to extend the fly arc on baseball as well. All of them would need to have the fly arcs extended
four.
because the grass is too far in for, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, sir. I believe it's all 4 fields, correct? That we'd need to extend those fly arcs.
The baseball fields, what is the baseline on the baseball field?
60-foot bases on the baseball field.
They're
Oh, those are 90.
Yeah,
Okay,
I-
so those would be fine.
Those are okay.
Those are okay. So then it's just 2 fields. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, are we ready for,
Well, yeah, I mean, what you're asking is our blessing for you to go to DBAT and to, basically DBAT, it would be DBAT's call, would it not? I mean,
No.
the
Or the
improvement to the
national-
field obviously is
Gotta fund
ours,
the
but,
change of the
I mean,
field.
The
as far as
national thing.
scheduling,
Well,
the tournament and so forth, that would be something that they would be involved.
Yeah, we would work, well, first of all, we would meet with, like I said, the owners of DBAT, somebody from San Antonio who's up in one of these sanctioned leagues, Mr. Weber, who's our president, Ashley, and, have a meeting, walk around, determine what did need to be done, if it was doable, okay? We'd have to determine, obviously, what it would cost to make the modifications. I wanted Mr. Weber just to briefly speak just on, and the economic impact of which I'm working with one of the league sponsors that shows exactly, you know, what it generates in income for a community. And, of course, we would have to work with DBAT to have, and we could have tournaments in February or March. In other words, we don't have kids that we have to bring in, so we have a kind of a wider schedule. And we could go into October and have tournament. Obviously, we'd have to dovetail with DBAT's schedule and tournaments that are scheduled, you know, so we wouldn't be competing with Georgetown or College Station or something like that. But yeah, basically, I thought, I don't want to spend the time going and running around doing all this if the Parks Board said, no, we don't think it's worth doing. It's a waste of your time and our time.
I think you're needing our blessing for a feasibility study on what this would not only impact but cost on our part to be able to take it before council to approve,
I
correct?
second that motion.
Motion's made and seconded that we recommend that
We're the Texas
Mr.
Hill Country Senior Softball League, THCSSL.org. We have a website,
Okay.
and it's been founded since 2012. And like I said, we have currently 6 teams with about 80 players, depending on what a day it is, and who's wearing ankle braces, knee braces, elbow braces, et cetera.
Okay, well, Mr. Weber, if you want to, we have a motion right quick. If we pass this, you're still welcome to talk if you want. Okay,
No, if you're in favor,
All right.
I can just add extra facts if you.
okay,
He's the brains.
okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Good luck.
Ashley, I think we're through with things we're gonna need to vote on. It's also string camp for the Hill Country Youth Orchestras, and I've got about 70 little kiddos wandering the halls. I need to go, if that's all right.
We still have a motion.
Yeah, you'll still have,
Lisa, okay.
we're
I'm
tag
here.
teaming.
I had a dentist appointment this morning. Here I am now.
I don't have anything else. Actually, is there anything else that you need to talk to us about?
Just if there's anything else you'd like to add to our list, that's it.
I have a community interest thing. We have the kids triathlon next Saturday.
Yeah.
It's the 23rd annual.
Thank you, Mr. Weber.
And we could use some help. Some volunteers just starting at between 7:30 and 7:45 in the morning. We'll get there at 7, but the event starts at 9, and we're pretty much wrapped up by 11:30. But I need some course marshals and people to help hand up water and just help with the kids. We have kids as young as 3, and it tops out around 15 or 16.
That's the 18th.
18th, yep, Saturday morning at Singing Wind Park.
So tell them how to contact you and when to be there and so forth, right quick.
Yep, so you can contact me at the bike shop, or my cell phone is 830-377-7198, or just Hill Country Bicycle Works down here in Kerrville. It'd be Saturday, we got course set up on Friday night, starting at 6:30. And then on Saturday, race day is when I really need some help, is, starting at like 7:30 in the morning, Saturday morning, and you're finished at about 11:30. And I'll give you all the information you need when you get there. There's volunteer handbooks, and I just need people out on the course helping out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And if you have any grandkids or kids or people or neighborhood.
I tried.
Yeah.
One said, I can't swim. Okay.
If there's nothing else before the board, we will adjourn as of 9:39. Thank you all for coming.
Okay.